Hey guys, this is Pedro back with another interview, this time covering VCT Americas Stage 1 2025 for Week 2. My guest at this time is none other than foe of 100 Evil Geniuses, the assistant coach of said team coming off of their match against 100 Thieves, in which they came out on the losing end in said competition. So, foe, thank you so much for the opportunity for this interview. Understand that it's pretty tough to go down in the manner in which you guys did earlier today, but nevertheless, gotta ask you the usual first question. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think we had a lot of like good control throughout the series. I think especially on Fracture, it was our map to lose. Um, and I think that's a good sign going forward. I mean, it sucks to lose. We don't want to lose, especially 2-0. But I mean, we did at least control a lot of that half, and it was on us to just fix the things that we weren't able to do and the things that we were doing kind of poorly. I think in the future it'll be pretty easy fixes across the board.
In the previous week, EG took on and then subsequently beat two game, and so the obvious onus was to continue this momentum into this matchup against 100 Thieves. So what I want to ask you is, what do you feel was the game plan that the squad had in mind when it comes to tackling 100 Thieves and the different problems that they showed to you in relation to what you guys last saw in your previous opponent?
Yeah, I think the game plan didn't really change entirely. I mean, we tried to play our game, but I think the difficulty comes in both games. I think we showed that we weren't closing out a lot of these close rounds, and that's really what it came down to. We did eke by in the first series versus 2G on Haven, but it was sort of the same issues that we need to lock down going forward, and it bit us here because obviously this one was a different result. So yeah, just need to tighten up on those fronts.
I want to ask you, just sort of not going map by map, is the fracture affair, and obviously like we saw a different composition from 100 Thieves with the chamber. We haven't really seen anybody within the all four international leagues, up to my understanding, of using that agent in an international or in an official match. I want to ask you, just sort of on top of just having to like deal with that agent, what do you feel that composition through, or more so, what do you feel was the most difficult part of just having to deal with that composition with the chamber acting as like a wrench, or not? You can kind of elaborate on that, but how was that experience for the team?
Yeah, I think anytime you play against a chamber, like the whole goal of a chamber is that they're going to try to disrupt all the normal things that you do with weird timings because they can just TP safely away. And obviously, Cryo's had a pretty good game. He had a pretty good map on Fracture, which when a chamber's doing that, it just disrupts things. It makes it a lot more difficult. You don't just get as clean of you don't get to execute your game plan as clean. And I think that I don't necessarily know it threw a wrench in anything, but I mean, when somebody has a standout performance, and takes over a map like that, it just makes it harder. I still think, regardless of whether or not he had a good map, we were still in control of that game the whole time. Though it just comes down on us to be able to still execute our game plan at the end of the day.
Yeah, because I said a wrench because like obviously he like was the best performing player onto for that squad, and obviously like there's kind of no better way for me to express it other than that. But yeah, definitely understand the understanding, or definitely understand the rationale regarding that usage of term for him, and also like going over to Haven, what was the sort of mindset, or more so, what was the team discussion that you guys had in between Fracture and Haven, and with and also having to like just try to bounce back in Haven, given that it is 100 Thieves map pick. What was the sort of um or more so, how did you look at the progression of the squad in this turnaround from map 1 to map 2?
Yeah, I mean, basically all that needed to be said was we were in control. We wanted to make sure that everyone knew we were in control of that first map. So going into the second one, when we get into that kind of position, which I feel like again on our attack on Haven, we had a lot of decisive and control. Rounds where we had decisiveness, we had control, and it was about just playing from that position where we have the reins, so to speak, and we need to be able to steer we need to just be able to steer in the right direction. um, I think again, it feels like we weren't able to really double down on that. I think that's what it comes down to. But just reinforcing that, everyone should feel good about the way that we were playing and the way that, we were controlling map one going into map two. But again, it just comes down to execution at that point.
I mean, I've had an opportunity to talk to various members of the squad following the first match against two game, and they kind of talked to me about the different obstacles that the team had to kind of look at and tweak and then improve from that point on. One thing that stood out to me, just sort of like amongst other things, is that you know the transition from having like icy to, or more so from Juggernaut to icy, and given that how you know you guys are taking an approach in which is much more of a collective kind of direction instead of just seeing like, oh, Juggernaut do this and this and that. He'll go up forward and then you guys can follow suit. Definitely a different version of this team with that in mind. What I kind of want to ask you, Fo, is how have you viewed the progression of the team while also having to tweak the squad from last year up until this year, and how have you said, and how have you seen said progression so far in this year?
Yeah, I think stylistically, Jaw is just one of the most aggressive players in the game. I mean, his W key is his favorite tool. So when you go to somebody like Icy, who's a more calculated player, we just have to adapt sort of the way that other people are approaching the round to fit that stylistically. It's been a great progression. Our breach is getting way more active now. Nature's a lot more activated. He's getting in. He's been having actually his first two series this year were really good for stage one. Even in kickoff, he had some good performances. He was doing great. But from kickoff to stage one, he's really been able to step up in that regard. Just getting active and being, more of the battling type of player that we need on the squad.
From your point of view, Fo, what do you feel is the biggest strength and weakness of this Evil Geniuses squad right now? Not just focusing on like today and stage one, but more so the entire year in general.
Yeah, I think our biggest strengths is that there's such a large talent pool and such a good collective of buy-in to the system. Like everyone believes in it. Everybody wants to double down and be a part of the system, and that's probably the biggest strength. Is that as long as we can keep that cohesiveness as a unit and move forward with that, it's what's going to drive us to be as good as we can be this year. I think weakness wise, it really just does come down to being composed in these like higher pressure situations, like doubling down again on the control that we have, and making sure that we're able to follow through with that game plan. Everybody buys into it, and as long as we're all together and we're able to execute together, that's when we're gonna shine.
I mean, looking over into the entire schedule so far of what we have seen from Evil Geniuses in this year, we've basically seen you guys take on almost every Brazilian squad in this league, and also taking on 100 Thieves, got Sentinels and Crew, and then once again Loud for the upcoming schedule. Two-part question for this one. Where do you kind of see the current level of this squad with all of the things that you've been talking about so far in this conversation considered in relation to the rest of the league? Where you kind of put it at in terms of the standings, and also the challenge ahead with Sentinels Crew and Loud up it next in the team's remaining stage one schedule. How do you kind of look at the challenge, if that's the appropriate way to say it?
Yeah, I think right now, I think we're sort of somewhere in the middle of the pack as far as our results go. I think as far as where I know we can and should be, towards the upper end, is the goal, and it's I know where we can be once we start to dial in on some of the things that I think we're just not executing as well right now. But I do think that it is something that we're very aware of, and I think we know exactly what the path forward is for that. And I think going forward, the next couple of matches, they're definitely going to be difficult. Crew is, in my opinion, one of the harder teams in our group this year. Sen obviously has been performing for the last 2 years. They've been doing great. I think they're sometimes a little bit hot or cold depending on some of the individual like performances. But as a team, they have a lot of really good structure. They have a lot of firepower. They're all shooters, so they can. If it's a day where they're at 100%, that's always going to be a tough game. And Loud, I mean, all the Brazilian teams just give 125% every time we play. So I'm, you can never count out Loud, and so they're not going to be an easy opponent in my opinion. But I do think in the last 2 years, not having Aspas, like their game plans had to develop a lot differently because when you have a player like Aspas, you build around like that kind of star power. So Loud's like evolved in a different way where now I think they're shifting towards a different approach towards the game. So I think it's safe to say that we don't necessarily know what to expect for their like future like long term performance, but they always give so much effort, so I know they'll be good.
I want to squeeze in one more question before I wrap it up. More so, just sort of the thoughts of the meta so far, because obviously I've had plenty of opportunities to talk to various people within the league as to their thoughts on the meta. I remember talking to Derek; he's not a really a big fan of it, so to speak, or more so to ball it up all up together. But what I want to ask you though is, given that we're now kind of pivoting towards mostly Tego and then double duelists, we've seen plenty of that all throughout VCT, and the manner in which EG has been trying to navigate the meta, opting for their own strengths instead of just following the lead and just kind of doing the same as the other or as the vast majority of the other squads in the scene. How do you kind of look at the meta from your point of view? And from your point of view, what do you feel is like the biggest aspect that you feel that the team had to work on the most amidst this current state?
Yeah, I honestly I don't love the way that the meta plays out right now. I think from like a especially from like a viewership perspective, the game is in a state where Tejo just forces you to slow down the game. I think there's a lot less chance and opportunity to be like super explosive in a lot of ways, because it's just easy to fall into a trap that you weren't ready for. So you really have to find ways to deal with this one singular character. I think not necessarily that he's overpowered. He's just developed the game in a different direction than we had previously. I don't think it's necessarily like a chamber situation where chamber defined the meta, because the character was just able to do too much by itself. But I do think that like the introduction of Tejo has put a lot more like map coverage utility on the map, which just makes it harder to go fast or to you have to be more methodical in your clearing and your executes. I think for the team, the struggle is finding like a balance between how do we still do the things that we're very comfortable doing and how do we innovate and find ways that work better, given the fact that Tejo is forcing us to do certain things differently just because the character it again it makes you play a certain way. So
Mhm. No, no, for sure. Definitely understand the insight that you have provided for this question just now that I just asked. And so really appreciate that. And also appreciate you doing this interview at the same time, answering all my questions, and also, like I said, providing insight as to what's going on in AG. Hopefully, you guys can bounce back from this match against the Thieves and, go on to much better things beyond that point. So, Fo, thank you so much for the interview. Really do appreciate it. And of course, best of luck on the road ahead.
thank you, and thank you for having me as well. I appreciate it.